Well, thank you for having us. We really appreciate the opportunity to come and spread the message about the golden mussels and what we've been doing in Solano County at Lake Berryessa. Um, so my name is Drew Gantner. I'm the manager of water resources for the Solano County Water Agency. And one of the responsibilities I've had since I came on board with the agency a couple years ago is managing our aquatic invasive species program. Up until November of last year, it was focused on quagga and zebra mussels. Given the discovery of golden mussels in the Delta, our program shifted extremely rapidly to address the threat. And I'll get into our program a little bit here. What I'd like to talk about today is their global and regional distribution, the biology of these mussels, their effects, and also what we're doing at Lake Berryessa to help control the introduction of these mussels into the Solano project. So real briefly, they were first discovered in North America in the Delta on October 17th. They're native to, and taking a step back, they're native to Southeastern Asia, Southeast China, Vietnam, Cambodia, that area. And throughout the 1900s, they've spread throughout East Asia into Japan. And then back in the 90s, they were transported most likely in container ships over to South America, Argentina, Brazil, Uruguay. And basically you can see in this green area here over in South America where they were transported to. And again, likely in ballast tanks on container ships. These ships have ballast tanks that hold thousands and thousands of gallons of water that they use for stability. Based on international shipping regulations, they are supposed to swap the water in these tanks out in the middle of the ocean. Unfortunately, that does not always happen, and that's how these species get transported around the world.
Of course.
So they were likely introduced into Stockton through the same mechanism through these ships, and the detections of these mussels in the Delta and the region are increasing at a very rapid rate now that we know they're here and we're actively looking for them. So some real quick facts. As I mentioned, they were discovered in the Delta on October 17th, 2024, and USBR put out a bulletin on October 28th. So roughly 2 weeks later, once they were able to positively verify that these were golden mussels using DNA methodologies. So they were found at Rough and Ready Island near Stockton on the 17th of October. They've been identified as one of the highest risk invasive species globally. It's the first ever detection of golden mussels in North America. And they're capable of spreading roughly 100 to 150 miles per year in aquatic ecosystems. So they pose an immediate and urgent threat to both the Delta ecosystem and water-based built infrastructure throughout California and North America. Department of Water Resources is contributing to a multi-agency team to monitor and report golden mussel sightings and coordinate on possible strategies for control and eradication. And they still are. They had a very nice meeting the other day giving everybody that's involved with the State Water Project an update. So these are the detections as of last night in the Delta and in California. So all of these red dots you can see here in the Delta are positive detections of adult mussels. And then you can also see here, these were also discovered back in October. That's O'Neill Forebay at San Luis Reservoir along the California Aqueduct. And just recently, they found these mussels down in Kettleman City in the Coastal Aqueduct, which is a branch of the California Aqueduct. So they are traveling through the California Aqueduct currently. And this was a map that was put out by one of our colleagues through the Department of Colorado Parks and Wildlife. They manage a watercraft information and decontamination database system. Several lakes in California, including us at Lake Berryessa, use this, and we use it to track vessel movement. It's a screening tool. All of the reservoirs are tied into it, and it allows us to determine if a boat has been in a positive water or if it has not. And what you can see here on this table, unfortunately, Lake Berryessa is at the top of the list. And so this is vessel traffic from the Delta to other water bodies. So seeing this and knowing about the threat that these golden mussels could pose to our water systems, we had to act very quickly, because these boats on the right are just a small example of the various types of boats that we get traveling to Berryessa from the Delta. Everything from these huge wakeboard boats that hold hundreds and hundreds of gallons of ballast water in them, even down to jet skis. These all pose a threat, and they're a risk to any lake or reservoir. So now I want to get into a little bit about the biology of these mussels and how they differ quite significantly from quagga or zebra mussels, which were the previous threat. I want you to look at this table here on the left-hand side, and you can see the calcium level. And this is a really important parameter to look at when you're looking at the ability of any organism to establish itself in a new water. Quagga and zebra mussels, which I mentioned were the previous threat, they require a fairly narrow range of calcium, 10 to 25 milligrams per liter. And all the literature that I've read says that golden mussels can survive in waters that have calcium levels ranging between 1 to 50. And they can really establish spawning gravid populations of these mussels in calcium ranges from 3 to 50, which means that these mussels can infest basically any lake in California. Quagga and zebra mussels were never really a threat to the lakes over in the Sierra foothills because they have fairly low calcium levels. But golden mussels really can inhabit any lake in California. And the other really interesting fact about these mussels is their pH tolerances. Quagga and zebra mussels needed a pH of 7.4 to 8.4, which is very normal for any natural water. But these golden mussels can survive in ranges of pH from 5 to 10. So very basic to very acidic. It's a huge range, and there have been studies on these tolerances, and they can actually handle pH ranges much lower than 5. But it's once you get above 10 is where you start seeing some attrition in these populations. And so I also want to get into their life cycle a little bit and how they pose a threat and how they travel very easily. So these mussels start off, eggs and sperm, just like every other organism. The females release 500,000 eggs a year into the water, 500,000 to 1 million eggs a year into the water. And the males release the sperm. They meet in the water, and then you have an embryo. Well, very quickly, that embryo becomes a free-swimming veliger larvae, and it can swim around in the water column for 2 to 3 weeks. Mind you, these are microscopic, okay? And they can reach densities of thousands of these little larvae per liter of water. So they'll swim around in the water column for a few weeks until they reach a size where they'll settle out and they'll find a substrate. And when I say substrate, anything that's hard, okay? Rocks, pilings, trash screens, water intakes, pumps, inside of water conveyance pipes. They will grow in these water conveyance pipes and they will strangle them and they will basically clog these pipes. So once they settle out and wherever they want to, as long as it's hard, they'll start to grow. And within about 3 months, depending on environmental conditions in warm waters and 6 months in cooler waters, they'll start spawning again, right? And they will populate an area of 1 square meter, with 100 to 150,000 adult organisms. So imagine that, 100,000 adult organisms on 1 square meter, and then they're releasing 500,000 to 1 million eggs per female. So half of those are female. There's no stopping them once they're established. They will out reproduce any competition that might consume them or otherwise. So they are a very, very significant threat. And what we're most concerned about at Lake Berryessa is this microscopic life stage. As I mentioned, they travel in boats. So when we think about boats as a watercraft inspector or decontaminator, what we're thinking about is not so much the outside of the boat, we're thinking about the inside of the boat. We're thinking about engine cooling systems, ballast tanks, bilges, live wells, you name it. Any part of that boat on the inside that can hold just a little puddle of water is a possible vector for the transmission of these mussels into other water bodies. So we did a real brief study on Lake Berryessa, and this actually was an older study that I took. And we wanted to see, okay, really, can they establish themselves in Berryessa and the Solano project? And the answer was yes. Previously, when we did this study, we were looking at quagga and zebra mussels and their tolerances. And so when you look at the calcium on this graph on the left-hand side, you can see there's a tan line between 15 and 10, and that's sort of the lower threshold for the calcium requirements for quagga and zebra mussels. But when I overlaid the calcium requirements for golden mussels, as indicated in this big red box, it's pretty much the whole graph. And the same thing with pH. The pH tolerances for the quagga and zebra mussels really, like I mentioned, 7.5 to 8.5, as indicated by this lower tan line. pH requirements in Berryessa previously were suitable for golden and zebra and quagga mussels, but this blue box, the big blue box here, really indicates the pH tolerances of these golden mussels. So it's just a huge range of water quality parameters that these mussels can inhabit. All right, effects. There are several effects, and I'll go into these in a little more detail, more than what I've talked about previously. So ecologically, I mentioned that these mussels can inhabit about 100,000 to 150,000 adult organisms per square meter. One adult organism will filter 1 liter of water per day, and it will remove all of the algae and all of the zooplankton from that water, and it'll consume it into its gut. All right. So once they consume all that algae, they remove that from the food web. And that's your food source for your larval bass, trout, any sport fish you might have. It's your food source for all your bait fish that support adult bass and sport fish. And so it can really cause a fisheries crash. And I hear this a lot. Oh, they clear the water up. Well, they do, but that's not good, because what it does is it allows sunlight to penetrate into deeper depths, and it promotes macrophytes from growing. So the larger algae that you see down at the bottom of these lakes, and that removes habitat from these fish, right? They like to hide under logs. They like to hide under rocks. And if it's all choked up with algae, they're not going to have anywhere to habitate. So, it doesn't necessarily clear the water in a good way. And the other thing it does by clarifying the water, and this is a very unique mechanism that these mussels, as well as quagga and zebra mussels have, is that they are selective feeders. So just because they filter it in doesn't mean that they digest it. And what they don't want to eat are toxic algae, blue-green algae, okay? So they'll consume the good algae and the bad algae, and they'll digest the good algae, but they'll spit the toxic algae out, okay? So now you have water that only has toxic algae in it with no competition. So it can grow even more. To add insult to injury, these mussels need to excrete their waste in the form of ammonia, nitrogen, and phosphorus. That's fertilizer. So now you're fertilizing this bad algae. So they will actually create harmful algal blooms and enhance harmful algal blooms in waters. And, you can see here in this picture here, this fish, this is Lake Erie, I believe. They do definitely pose a significant risk to human health and water quality, through their enhancement of these toxic algal blooms. As far as water infrastructure, I mentioned it, they will clog agricultural systems, urban water conveyances, so trash screens, irrigation pumps, irrigation pipes, water treatment facilities. They will absolutely clog these and make it extremely difficult to manage these facilities and extremely expensive to maintain these facilities. And recreational, aspects of these golden mussels is that, they do a lot of damage to boats. You can see here on the outdrive of this boat, they'll grow on, the outdrives on the hulls of boats, on docks, on pilings. They'll grow on rock surfaces. You'll get shell hash all over any recreational beaches that there might be at the lake, which, no one wants to go walk around on a beach covered with broken shells. So recreationally, they're a huge detriment to that aspect of using public access. And additionally, like I mentioned, you can have these toxic algal blooms in the lakes, which makes it impossible for people to swim. So DWR put out a water infrastructure vulnerability study a little while back, and I'll just kind of let you read through this table that they put together, talking about all the different aspects. This isn't all, but several of the different aspects of their water conveyance infrastructure that they're considering they're going to have to deal with these mussels. Everything from trash racks, intake pipes and pumps, fire systems. That's an important one. Fire systems are essential, and they don't get used very often. There's not a lot of flow going through these pipes. They'll test them once a month, once a quarter, and then they shut them off. And that gives plenty of time for these mussels to attach to these pipes and grow. And if they're doing it once a month, that also can sometimes give them enough fresh water and food to survive for another month. They're very hardy organisms. And so then what happens when you have a fire? You can't move water, okay? And so here's some examples of this was a trash rack that was put down. I believe this was in San Justo Reservoir. These would be zebra mussels, but it's the same exact effect. This is a 6-month growth experiment. Trash rack here on the right, on the left is brand new, And over here on the right is after 6 months of being submerged in a lake. Okay. And then these are some pipes that were provided to me by a consultant. These are down in Brazil. I think this pipe on the left here is for a water treatment system at a water treatment plant. And this is another water conveyance pipe. And you can see here on the inside of this pipe, it's just choked full of mussels. So we heard about it. We knew about it, or what they can do. What do we do? And I hear that question a lot from other reservoirs and other water agencies. What do we do? We sat down with USBR, Napa County, and the concessionaires at the lake, and we all put our heads together to try to figure out a way of how to address this issue and prevent them from getting into Lake Berryessa. And there were really two options: shut the lake down, or implement a control system for allowing boats to still get in to use the lake for recreational purposes. And we went with the second option. So how do you control them? This is a system that's used across the country. This is nothing new. We've just adopted it for our personal reservoir and our needs. We implemented a seal system. So any boat that wants to launch at Lake Berryessa needs to have a red quarantine seal attached to the boat. And as you can see here, it's a wire tie that goes between the boat and the frame of the trailer. And it's locked into place with this little custody seal that you have here. It's tamper-proof. Once the clasp is shut, you cannot open it. The lock will shatter if you try to open it. So it's tamper-proof. So a boat needs to have one of those applied to it, and it stays on that boat for 30 days. And that's been considered an adequate amount of time for any mussels inside of these boats, the veligers that I was talking about, to die off, okay? Once they go through that 30-day waiting period, they can go up to the lake. They can go to any of the launch ramps. The concessionaires are working with us on this. That wire with a red seal on it is going to get cut. They're free to launch. Then when they leave the lake, they'll go back to the office at the launch ramp. That the attendant at the launch ramp will come out and put on a green seal. Okay. Once the boat has a green seal on it that attaches the boat to the trailer, which prevents it from launching anywhere else, they're free to come and go to Lake Berryessa as often as they want. Okay. Then there's no restrictions. A lot of people don't want to wait 30 days. And we recognize that. So what we've done is we've also implemented a decontamination system. And we partnered with, and I'll get to this later, but we partnered with several of the concessionaires at the lake, as well as our own staff are performing watercraft decontaminations. So once they go through that process, they're allowed to launch their boat immediately. And then when they come off, they can get their green seal. We did have to be realistic about this, and we had to look at risk factors. So we also determined, and these pretty much the same system up at Lake Tahoe, low risk boats are considered kayaks or hand launched boats. Most people are fairly intelligent. They'll drain the water out of their boat before they put it back on top of their car. You're not going to get a lot of this unverifiable water getting transported on kayaks or stand-up paddle boards. So that's kind of that's where we draw the line. Is very simple. Low risk boats do not need to go through the SEAL program or go through inspections. And to give you an idea of the types of watercrafts that we encounter at Lake Berryessa, I put this chart together for our previous program, and we look at the types of boats, and they range from high risk boats, meaning they have lots of internal compartments and lots of water storage capacity, down all the way down here to low risk boats. And you can see here our most common boats that we have at the Lake Berryessa, wakeboard fishing and water ski boats, are either very complex here or complex boats, meaning they have lots of parts on the inside that can transfer this water. And I should also mention that due to the proximity of these mussels to in the Delta to Lake Berryessa, we really need to assume that every boat has just been in the Delta. We get thousands of boats every year that go back and forth, and we cannot, and sometimes like one day after the other, I mean, literally it's an hour away. So they could be in the Delta in the morning and go and fish at Berryessa in the afternoon. So we have to be extremely cautious about that. And so this is, again, we do get a lot of very high risk boats that come to Berryessa. So I mentioned our decontamination program. I mentioned that boats can forego the 30-day quarantine if they would like to go get a decontamination. I mentioned that we have to assume that every boat's been in the Delta. It's really unfortunate. It's just the reality of what we're living with right now. we flush all the suspected components of a watercraft with hot water. It's called the standing water decontamination. So I mentioned all those components: ballast tanks, engine cooling system, live wells, billages, air conditioning systems, generator cooling systems on some boats. So all of those components inside the boat, we run water at 120 degrees through most compartments and 140 degrees through engine compartments and the exterior of the boat if it shows up wet or the trailer is wet. We are going to be implementing a fee structure beginning next Monday, April 7th, this coming Monday, simply because we've been doing this for free since November, and staffing a lot of man hours, purchasing tons and tons of equipment, and actually constructing decontamination units from scratch, because commercially available ones take months and months to build. So we went out and we actually designed and fabricated our own mobile decontamination units, and they actually work pretty well. Our engineering and field staff really did a great job on that. So right now we have decontamination stations at Markley Cove, Pleasure Cove, and Puda Canyon. We have worked with those concessionaires with our staff. We have, myself and several others are WID 3 certified. That means we are trained trainers. We have gone out to these concessions. They have agreed and wanted to implement this service into their business, and we have trained them on how to do these decontaminations. So right now, Pleasure Cove is already doing them. Puta Canyon is going to start doing them on Monday, and Markley Cove will start doing them on April 23rd with their own staff. We just don't have the capability to staff and several decontamination stations around the lake with the unfortunate the way the grant's working right now for the state. And then we also have a decontamination station down at Lake Solano. So that's 4 of them that we're currently operating. And the Lake Solano station, we do have the ability to expand that to run 2 decontamination units on extremely busy days. And currently we're looking for third-party partners. And this is something that I've heard from other lakes. They don't have the staffing to man a decontamination station. So we are actively soliciting requests for qualifications from third-party vendors who have the technical expertise, as in like a boat mechanic, and understanding how boats operate and work, to provide these services at their businesses as well. So that's actively going on, and that will close on May 2nd. And what are other waters doing in the region? I talk to a lot of other lakes on a fairly regular basis. A lot of them are still trying to figure it out. A lot of them took a very similar approach to what we did: act quickly, restrict access as quick as we can, and then we'll figure out how to open it up later. So currently Hennessy, water supply for Napa is closed. Comanche and Pardee reservoirs, those are operated by East Bay Mud. They're closed. I spoke with them just yesterday. They do not plan on reopening them, at least for a year, according to what they're telling me. Scotts Flat and Rollins Lake, those are Nevada Irrigation District lakes. Those are closed. They are going to be implementing a seal system. New Melones has implemented a seal system. Tulloch is closed. And then Folsom Lake is to be determined. They are going to be making a decision on what they're going to do very, very soon. It'll be public, and it'll probably hit the headlines in the next week or so. But Folsom Lake has a lot of entities operating in the American River watershed, a lot of upstream reservoirs, and they're operated by PG&E, U.S. Forest Service, Placer Irrigation, a whole bunch of different fingers in the pot. And so it's a matter of getting everybody on the same page. Are we all going to abide by the same system? Because if our upstream partners are not going to use the system, why should we? And there's a lot of other reservoirs in the region that are still just trying to figure out what they're going to do. This is the unique thing about this issue, is that every reservoir is managed and operated by a different agency or agencies, and they have to manage their own water as they see fit. So that's a very common question I get from boaters, is like, why can't you all implement a seal system that can be shared between all the lakes? Well, it boils down to, we don't tell them what to do. They make their own decisions. And then once they make that decision, we need to look at why would we want to accept a boat coming from another reservoir if they're not doing monitoring. If they're not monitoring to see if golden mussels are in their lake, well, there's no point. Why? We don't want that boat. And so it's going to take a little bit of time for everybody to get on the same page and to agree on, hey, we all want to start a little cooperative here and a reciprocity program. So we need to determine, what monitoring frequencies and methods are we going to use. We've always traditionally done Vellager tows and visual inspections around Lake Berryessa. And starting on Monday, we're going to actually start doing some eDNA sampling. because that's a far more robust method for sampling for these mussels. So again, it's just a matter of time and coordination. And a lot of agencies are just trying to, it's a triage. That's really all it is. And just, I'm going to close with this. This is a photo of San Justo Reservoir. This is down in Hollister. This is the boat ramp down there at San Justo. And this is a
Wow.
USDA facility. And each one of these clumps that you see here, those are zebra mussels. They're not golden mussels, but they have the same kind of life stage and population dynamic. They just build clumps everywhere. And this was a concrete boat ramp right here. That used to be a smooth concrete boat ramp. And each one of these mounds is just a clump of mussels. So, for us and any other lake in the region, we would hate for the shorelines of our lakes to look like that. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.